The Midwest is vast. To the outsider, it is simply miles of cornfields, dense patches of unmapped forests, and long, empty highways that seem to stretch into the gray nothingness. It is a place of undeniable beauty, certainly, but it is also a place of profound isolation. And in that silence, in that overwhelming empty space, things hide. Things that were here long before we poured concrete or built cabins, and things that will remain long after we are gone. Welcome back to Midwest Mysteries. I am your host. Tonight, I have a story that comes to us from the freezing, pine-choked depths of northern Minnesota. It is a story about the pace of desperation, rules that must be obeyed no matter how absurd they seem, and the consequences of breaking them. This is going to be a long night, my friends. So I want you to grab a heavy blanket, lock your doors, check them twice, and whatever you do, do not look out the window if you feel eyes upon you. Let's begin. The job offer was too good to decline. That was my first mistake. My name is Elias, and 3 years ago, I was desperate. Debts were piling up, the kind that keep you awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling. And the city life in Chicago was chewing me up and spitting me out. When I saw the advertisement on a niche forum for winter caretakers, I clicked immediately. It felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. The job was simple enough on paper. Spend 3 months at the Blackwood Estate, a massive modernized cabin located about 40 miles from the nearest town in northern Minnesota. The pay was absurdly high, $10,000 a month. All I had to do was keep the pipes from freezing, clear the snow from the deck, and ensure the property remained secure during the harsh winter months when the owners wintered in Florida. I arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in my beat-up Ford truck. The air up there was different. It was crisp, sharp, smelling of pine needles and impending snow. The estate was beautiful, I have to admit. It was a sprawling structure of dark, treated wood and floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking a frozen lake that looked like a sheet of white steel. It felt peaceful. The owner, a man named Mr. Sterling, wasn't there to greet me. Instead, there was a key left under the mat and a thick leather binder on the kitchen counter, simply titled Caretaker's Manual. I unpacked my bags, feeling a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. The silence was absolute. No traffic, no sirens, no yelling neighbors, just the wind moving through the birch trees. I sat down at the granite kitchen island, poured myself a coffee, and opened the manual. The first few pages were standard procedure: how to operate the backup generator, where the fuse box was located, the Wi-Fi password, emergency numbers for the sheriff and the fire department. But on the very last page, handwritten in shaky, jagged ink that looked different from the typed pages before it, was a list simply titled The Protocol. It read as follows: Rule number 1, keep the perimeter lights on from dusk until dawn. Do not let a bulb burn out for more than an hour. Rule number 2, ensure the heavy curtains in the living room are drawn before 5 p.m. Rule number 3, do not acknowledge the deer standing on 2 legs. They are not deer. Rule number 4, if you hear whistling from the tree line, lock the cellar door immediately and go to the 2nd floor. Do not come down until sunrise. And finally, rule number 5, if the radio turns on by itself, do not turn it off. Just leave the room. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud in that empty kitchen. Okay, very funny, I muttered to the empty room. I figured the previous caretaker was trying to haze the new guy. Just a spooky joke to mess with my head. A little bit of local color to spice up the boredom. I ignored the list. I left the manual open on the counter and went to explore the house. That night, I didn't close the curtains. I wanted to see the snowfall. I wanted to enjoy the view I was being paid to watch. The first night was uneventful mostly. The house was a marvel of engineering, warm and soundproof. I spent the evening reading a book by the fireplace, the crackling wood providing a comforting rhythm. Around 11 o'clock, I decided to turn in. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, boasting a balcony that looked out over the backyard and the dense forest beyond. Before bed, I stepped out onto the balcony for a smoke. The cold was biting, sinking into my bones instantly. The perimeter lights, huge floodlights mounted on the corners of the house, illuminated the snow in a harsh, artificial yellow glow. I was about to flick my cigarette butt into the snow below when I saw it. Movement, just at the edge of the light, where the illumination faded into the black wall of the forest. I squinted against the glare. A deer. It was just a deer. A large buck with impressive antlers stood perfectly still, staring at the house, staring at me. I smiled, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "Hey there, buddy," I called out softly. The buck didn't move. It didn't twitch an ear. It didn't blink. It just stood there. There was something rigid about it, like a taxidermy mount placed in the snow. It looked too stiff, too tall. Then the motion sensor light on the garage flickered. When the light stabilized a second later, the buck was gone. No sound of hooves crunching away. Just gone. I shivered, not from the cold this time, and went inside. As I locked the balcony door, I glanced at the digital clock on the nightstand. It was 11:11 p.m. I slept poorly that night. I dreamed of running through deep snow, my legs heavy as lead, while a low, melodic whistling echoed all around me. 3 days passed. The isolation was starting to settle in, wrapping around me like a thick fog. I had developed a routine. Wake up, check the generator, shovel the deck, eat, read, sleep. I had almost forgotten about the list of rules until Thursday morning. A fresh layer of snow had fallen overnight, a pristine white blanket covering the world. I grabbed my shovel and went out to clear the front walkway. The air was dead silent, the kind of silence that hurts your ears. As I worked my way around the side of the house near the living room windows, the ones I hadn't covered with curtains, I stopped dead in my tracks. There were footprints, but they weren't mine, and they weren't from an animal. They were bare feet, human footprints, barefoot in the snow and temperatures well below zero. I dropped the shovel, the metal clanging loudly against the ice. The prints started from the edge of the woods, walked in a straight line up to the glass window, stood there, and then walked back into the woods. I crouched down to examine them. They were large, too large. The toes were elongated, almost finger-like. In the stride, the distance between each step was nearly 5 feet. Whatever made these prints had legs much longer than a human. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I looked at the window. If I had been sitting in the living room last night, reading with the curtains open, this thing would have been standing right here, watching me, inches away from the glass. I ran inside and locked the door behind me, fumbling with the deadbolt. I grabbed the leather manual and flipped to the back page. Rule number 2, ensure the heavy curtains in the living room are drawn before 5 p.m. "Okay," I whispered, my hands shaking. "Okay, no more jokes." I spent the next hour checking every window and door. I drew every curtain in the house, plunging the interior into a gloom that required artificial light even at noon. I decided I would leave in the morning. Screw the money, this wasn't worth it. But nature had other plans. By 4 p.m., the sky turned a bruised purple and the wind began to howl. The radio weather alert system screeched to life. Blizzard warning in effect. Zero visibility. Roads impassable. Do not attempt travel. I was trapped. The storm raged for 2 days. The wind battered the house like a physical fist, shaking the timbers. I felt like I was inside a submarine at the bottom of a dark ocean. On the second night of the blizzard, the power flickered. The generator kicked in with a distant hum, keeping the lights on. But they were dimmer now. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched that had settled over me like a wet blanket. Suddenly, the old ham radio in the corner of the living room, a decorative antique, I thought, crackled to life. Static filled the room. I froze. The manual. Rule number 5. If the radio turns on by itself, do not turn it off. Just leave the room. I stared at the radio. The dial was glowing a faint orange. Through the static, a voice began to emerge. It wasn't a broadcast. It wasn't music. It was my voice. "Hey there, buddy," the radio said. It was a recording of me talking to the deer from the balcony. Static washed over it again. Then another clip. "Okay, very funny. That was me laughing at the list on day 1. Screw the money. That was me talking to myself yesterday." I backed away, my blood running cold. The radio was playing back things I had said inside the house and on the balcony. It was listening. It had been listening the whole time. Then the voice changed. It was still my voice, but the cadence was wrong, choppy, artificial, like someone cutting words from a newspaper to make a ransom note, but with audio. Open the door, Elias. I didn't turn it off. I remembered the rule. I backed out of the living room, raced up the stairs to my bedroom, and slammed the door. I pushed a heavy dresser in front of it. I sat on my bed, clutching a fire poker I had grabbed from the upstairs lounge, listening to the wind scream. But under the wind, I could hear it. Downstairs, the radio was getting louder, screaming my own name in a loop. Elias, Elias, Elias. Silence returned around 3:00 a.m. The radio stopped. The storm lulled. I was exhausted, drifting in and out of a terrified stupor. I needed to check the generator. If the fuel ran out, the perimeter lights would die. Rule number 1, keep the perimeter lights on. I grabbed a heavy flashlight in my coat. I had to go out. The generator shed was only 20 yards from the back door. I moved through the dark house. The living room was silent. The radio sat dark and lifeless. I unlocked the back door and stepped into the freezing air. The snow was waist deep. I trudged toward the shed, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the swirling flakes. I reached the shed, checked the fuel gauge. It was low. I grabbed a jerry can and began to pour. That's when I heard the whistling. It was a cheerful, lilting tune, Yankee Doodle. But it was slow, painfully slow, and it was coming from the roof of the shed I was standing in. I froze. The whistling stopped. Elias? The voice came from above me. It sounded exactly like my mother. My mother who had died 5 years ago in Chicago. Elias, honey, let me in. It's cold. Tears pricked my eyes, an involuntary reaction to the familiarity of the voice. But my brain screamed predator. I didn't look up. I dropped the gas can. I ran. I scrambled through the snow, falling, getting up, gasping for air. Behind me, a heavy thud hit the snow. I didn't look back. I slammed the back door, locked the deadbolt, and slid the chain into place. From the other side of the door, inches from my face, a voice, my own voice again, whispered, "You forgot the gas cap, Elias." Then a low, guttural laugh that sounded like rocks grinding together. I retreated to the center of the house. The hallway. No windows. I had broken the rules. I had acknowledged the whistling. I hadn't gone to the second floor immediately. I had been outside. The psychological warfare began an hour later. It started with a gentle knock on the front door. Knock, knock, knock. Polite. Then a knock on the back door. Then a knock on the second floor balcony door. Then knocking on the roof. It was everywhere at once. A cacophony of rapping knuckles against wood and glass. It was testing the perimeter, testing my sanity. I sat on the floor, hands over my ears, rocking back and forth. Go away, go away, go away. The knocking stopped abruptly. In the silence, I heard the doorknob of the front door rattle, violent shaking. The wood groaned. Rule number 3, do not acknowledge the deer standing on 2 legs. I realized then that the deer I saw that first night wasn't just watching, it was marking me. I needed a weapon, a real one. The fire poker wasn't enough. I remembered seeing a gun cabinet in the owner's study, but it was locked. I ran to the study. I smashed the glass of the cabinet with the poker. Inside was a hunting rifle and a box of ammo. My hands shook as I loaded it. I felt a little safer with the steel in my hands, but then I realized something terrible. The protocol said, if you hear whistling, lock the cellar door immediately. I hadn't locked the cellar door. The entrance to the cellar was in the kitchen, a simple wooden door that I assumed led to a pantry or storage. I stood in the kitchen, the rifle raised. The door was slightly ajar. Darkness spilled out of it like ink. I had to close it. I stepped closer. The air coming from the crack was rotten. It smelled of wet earth and copper, old blood. I reached out with my foot to kick the door shut. From the darkness below, a hand shot out. It was pale, hairless, and had too many joints. It grasped the door frame. Then another hand. I fired. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet splintered the wood of the door frame. A shriek erupted from the basement, a sound that was half human scream, half elk bugle. The hands recoiled. I slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt. Then I dragged the heavy kitchen island, screaming with exertion until it blocked the door. I collapsed against the island, panting. Why was the rule about the cellar? Why did I have to lock it if the whistling came from outside? Unless the thing doesn't just come from the woods, unless it can move through the earth. Or worse, maybe there's more than one. I looked at the caretaker's manual on the counter. I ripped it open, looking for anything I missed. Between the pages, a Polaroid photo fell out. It was a picture of the previous caretaker. He looked terrified, holding a sign that said, "It can mimic shapes too." And on the back of the photo, scrawled in red ink, Mr. Sterling didn't hire us to watch the house. He hired us to feed it. The lights flickered and died. The generator was out of fuel. Total darkness consumed the Blackwood estate. The only light came from the moon reflecting off the snow outside. The house groaned. The siege had begun. Glass shattered in the living room. I scrambled back to the stairs, retreating to the second floor. I could hear heavy, wet footsteps on the hardwood floor below. Slap, slap, slap. It sounded like wet meat hitting the ground. I barricaded myself in the master bedroom. I pointed the rifle at the door. "Elias!" The voice came from the hallway. It was the voice of my father this time. "Elias, I'm so proud of you. Open the door, son." "You're not him," I screamed. "You're not real. Don't be rude, Elias," the voice deepened, distorting into a growl. "We just want to wear you." The door handle turned. The lock held. Then silence. I waited. Minutes turned into hours. The cold was intense. I could see my breath. Suddenly, I heard a sound that froze my heart, the sound of the window behind me sliding up. I spun around. A figure was climbing in from the balcony. It looked like me. It was wearing my clothes. It had my face, but its mouth was too wide, stretching ear to ear, filled with needle-like teeth. And its eyes were yellow with horizontal pupils like a goat. My doppelganger smiled. "Found you." I pulled the trigger. Click. Misfire. The thing lunged. I swung the rifle like a club, smashing it into the thing's face. It felt like hitting a bag of wet cement. It screeched, stumbling back, clutching its ruined face. I didn't wait. I sprinted out of the bedroom, down the hall, and vaulted over the railing of the stairs, landing hard on the first floor. My ankle popped, sending a jolt of agony up my leg. I limped toward the front door. Behind me, the thing was tumbling down the stairs, limbs flailing in impossible angles, laughing maniacally. I burst out the front door into the snow. The storm had stopped, but the cold was lethal. My truck. I had the keys in my pocket. I ran, hobbling through the drifts, my lungs burning. I could hear the thing bursting through the front door behind me. I reached the truck, ripped the door open and dove inside. I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered. "Come on, come on, come on." I screamed, slamming the steering wheel. The creature slammed onto the hood of the truck. It stared at me through the windshield, my own face twisted into a mask of hunger. It raised a fist to smash the glass. The engine roared to life. I threw it into reverse, flooring the gas. The truck jerked back, throwing the creature off into the snow. I shifted to drive and sped down the driveway, fishtailing on the ice. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I drove like a madman, hitting the main road, doing 60 miles an hour on black ice. I didn't stop until I reached the town of Bemidji, 40 miles away. I pulled into a gas station, shaking uncontrollably, weeping over the steering wheel. I was alive. I told the police everything. They didn't believe the monster part, of course. They went to the estate to investigate. They found the house empty. No footprints, no shattered glass. The generator was full. They told me I had suffered a mental break from the isolation. Cabin fever, they called it. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. I moved to Arizona, somewhere dry, hot, and crowded. No forests, no snow. But sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I hear it, faintly coming from the air vents. A whistling, Yankee Doodle. And I know one day I'll look out my window and see a deer standing on two legs in the desert sand. Because you can leave the Midwest, but the mysteries, they follow you. And that, my friends, is why you never take a job that seems too good to be true. Especially not in the deep woods where the rules of man do not apply. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It helps the channel grow in the algorithm more than you know. And if you are new here, subscribe and turn on the bell. We upload long-form horror every week. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done in Elias's shoes? Would you have opened the cellar door? Until next time, stay out of the woods and keep your curtains drawn. Good night.